Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Zhou Yue. Amid rising tensions in the Asia-Pacific, the prestigious annual security summit known as the Shangri-La Dialogue kicks off in Singapore. High-ranking officials and military experts are gathered to debate solutions to complex security challenges and policy making for defense. So, what are the challenges in this part of the world? And how should the dialogue facilitate a comprehensive framework to meet those challenges? And with the tensions in the South China Sea looming large, what is China's stance on solving the disputes? And how will China present itself at the summit? I'm happy to be joined by Senior Colonel Zhou Bo, Director of International Security Cooperation in the Ministry of National Defense. Welcome to Dialogue. I know Shangri-La Dialogue is an annual forum for security topics. But what exactly is going to be the highlight of this year? Could you please give us some context of this security dialogue first?
In Asia Pacific, as a result of the concern for security, there are many forums. The Shangri-La Dialogue is the most influential one. It started in 2002, and China has sent all delegations to participate. But ever since 2007, we actually have upgraded the level of participation. Normally, it is headed by a Deputy Chief of General Staff. Why? Because he normally is a man in charge of foreign affairs from a military perspective. So this year's forum is all about regional security, as it was in the past, but the focus turned out to be always what the United States would say, what China would say, and actually the organizer ISS had a very clever arrangement that is always to put the speech of American Secretary of Defense on the first day and the speech by the Chinese head of delegation on the second day, because such a kind of separative arrangement would ensure maximum audience and media attention.
But how did the Shangri-La dialogue mechanism come into being? And is it only about Asian security exclusively?
I think more or less it's about Asia-Pacific areas with the focuses on maritime issues, so on and so forth. If I have a comparison, I would say China's Xiangshan Forum probably is more balanced. We would extend it to cover regions in the Central Asia, for example, and we would even allow the minister of a small country like Maldives to talk about his perspective about what he thought about the regional security. And this kind of things would not be imaginative or imaginable in the Shangri-La Dialogue.
We understand that Shangri-La Dialogue will debate a lot of security issues, how to meet Asia's complex security challenges, how to manage military competition in this part of the world, and how to coordinate defense policies between different nations. How can these talks change the security situation and the cooperation dynamics among nations?
I think, as I mentioned before, one of the characteristics of Shangri-La Dialogue is to focus on the hottest issue. So you actually would hear such words like challenges, uncertainties, all these kind of words. But what really would reflect regional security? Is the world becoming more dangerous, particularly in the Asia-Pacific? Well, some people would argue like that, particularly because of tension in South China Sea. But if we look at the rest of the world, the Middle East is definitely chaotic because it's a Syrian issue. And Europe is troubled with influx of endless refugees, with the possible exit of Britain from a European Union zone, or the almost hopeless debt issue of Greece. So comparatively speaking, Asia-Pacific is booming economically. But in terms of security, yes, there are issues like DKP Ark's nuclear issue and tension in South China Sea. But by and large, people still believe this area is manageable and nobody is talking about a war.
Some people may argue the Shangri-La Dialogue has become a platform for U.S. and its allies to unite them and stand up to China because of the South China Sea disputes. What do you think the dialogue's direction, and is China up to take the challenge?
Well, actually, in my personal observation, from 2012 onwards, the United States has actually stepped up its criticism or even attacks on China at the Shangri-La dialogue. This would surely invite a robust response from the Chinese delegation. The year before last, General Wang Guanzhong actually talked off his prepared speech for 10 minutes to talk about China's view. Actually, it's a counter measure to what American Secretary of Defense have made. So yes, it is indeed an unhealthy phenomenon in Shangri-La dialogue that the U.S. would strongly criticize China. But the irony is, this, however, would not really reflect the whole picture between China and the U.S. That is, in spite of the vulnerability in bilateral relationship, there is also resilience even in bilateral military relationship, because the two militaries also have a lot of cooperations, particularly in non-traditional security areas, for example, in counter-piracy, addressing disaster relief, and even the beginning of the cooperation between two armies. And the United States this year, as it was in 2014, has again invited China to attend the RIMPAC 2016. And during the close-in approach between Chinese ships and US ships, the two sides have actually maintained a kind of professionalism in line with cues.
But do you think at Shangri-La dialogue, the US and Chinese delegations have a better understanding of each other's strategy and tactics in the South China Sea? Do you really talk to each other and have a better understanding of each other?
I think to a great extent, yes, because with this kind of very frank, even outspoken remarks, people do have a better understanding of the view of the other side. But as I said before, sometimes in the limelight, people probably would unconsciously become a kind of actors, especially you are facing media cameras and you know your remarks would be spread around the world. So people would unconsciously behave like an actor to say something that is somewhat exciting or even provocative. That, however, would not reflect the other side of the coin. That is cooperation, which is still going on between the two militaries, and both sides have vowed to strengthen.
Many countries worry that China's growth of its military might pose threat to the rest of the world. But on the other hand, China has been trying to provide public good for the international community with its military by sending troops to UN peacekeeping, counterterrorism. Can you elaborate on the efforts that China has taken on that front?
The PLA actually has a dual functions. One is similar to all other armed forces, that is to safeguard your sovereignty and territorial integrity. The other thing which makes the PLA increasingly different from all other countries is that it is stepping up efforts to go out. That is to safeguard China's ever-growing national interest overseas and to fulfill its international responsibilities. Let's take China's counter-piracy in the Gulf of Aden, for example. What does it stand for? It is, of course, for safeguarding China's national interest, because its primary function is to safeguard Chinese ships. But at the same time, we have escorted almost half of the whole ships being foreign ships. So this is how we can actually help. And during the evacuation of Chinese nationals from Libya and Yemen, we have also evacuated a lot of foreigners from these two countries.
Let's come back to South China Sea issue. This is a hotly debated topic, and almost every year at the Shangri-La dialogue. What is China's stance on this? Has it evolved from previous years? What is going to be the China's standpoint this time at Shangri-La dialogue?
I think China's position on South China Sea is constant. That is, we maintain that all the islands and reefs are Chinese, indisputable Chinese territories. But at the same time, we advocate for resolution through friendly negotiation and consultations, which is stipulated in DOC between China and ASEAN countries. The situation in South China Sea is by and large peaceful. The only problem is obviously the United States has come from behind the scene and actually is taking a position, I would say, because they themselves claim they are not taking a position and they are not taking sides. But if you look at the United States right now and how often they send ships and aircraft to the South China Sea, could you argue they are not taking a position or they are taking no sides? They at least have made things more complicated.
About the South China Sea issue, they say it's an egg and chicken problem, because who is having the initial blame? Some say that China has been building up its military facilities, has been doing land reclamation on those islands. That's what triggered the U.S. military maneuver, including freedom and navigation operations in the South China Sea, by asking from the claimant, other claimants. What do you think?
Well, I think you're talking about militarization. Indeed, it's a question, but the point is, as the United States has claimed, it is taking no sides, and it doesn't have a position on the sovereignty of the maritime features in South China Sea. Therefore, logically, it comes to the DOC, which stipulates that this issue should be resolved between China and the claimants in the wording, that is, countries directly concerned to resolve this issue through friendly negotiation and consultation. So what is the role of the United States in this? The point is the presence, the frequent military presence, the patrolling of the United States in the South China Sea has actually made the situation more complicated for an issue which it has vowed not to be involved in.
They say that those other claimants are smaller in strength, military strength and economic strength. They are not able to stand up to China. That's why the United States asked by those claimant countries to come to help maintain the balance of power.
Indeed, that's an allegation, but I personally do not believe being small, all your behaviors are justifiable. Let me give you an example. Philippines is much smaller than China. But how many people know Filipino actually have killed and wounded the Chinese in 3 different years? That is truth. And has China ever used force against the Filipinos at all? The second example is Philippines initiated an arbitration against China in International Maritime Tribunal, but the Philippines have also concluded a maritime delimitation agreement with Indonesia back in 2014. So this shows that the Filipino government actually is taking a different approach towards different neighbors. With China, I sue you in international court. With Indonesia, I negotiated bilaterally, and after 20 years, they succeeded in that. But
so
is it
Philippines being
double
selective,
standard? Yes.
double standards
Yes.
when
Yes.
they're doing with military and diplomatic relations
of
with
course.
Asian countries?
Yeah, because everybody knows once it comes to territory or sea boundary, it takes a long time to negotiate. And in this case, it takes the Filipinos 20 years to negotiate with the Indonesians. So if you have such goodwill and patience to negotiate with the Indonesians for 20 years, why can't you negotiate with China? And China's experience demonstrated China is not short of either goodwill or patience to resolve the land border with so many countries.
And to do that, the Philippines has also been filing a case to the Court of Arbitration, Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague. And the ruling will come out, will be delivered very soon. Of course, China said it is not involved in the process, it will not accept the ruling, but in the end, the ruling will some kind of impact on the tension in South China Sea. How do you think the impact will be?
Well, as the Deputy Foreign Minister Liu Zhenmin has already talked about it, yes, there would be an award, and probably it's not in China's favor. But since we have made clear that we will not participate or accept the award, so it doesn't matter at all. I want to highlight one thing. People always associate China's declaration with this case. But in fact, China made the declaration as early as in 2006. It has nothing to do with the Filipinos' initiation of arbitration in 2013. So that means when we made the declaration, we are not thinking of any countries to be involved. We are just thinking about the clauses themselves in UNCLOS, which is, in this case, 298.
Okay. We'll talk about this later on. You've been watching Dialogue. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Okay, let's come back to the ruling of the arbitration court. Well, it may be the case that China was not part of it and will not accept the ruling, but it seems in the arena of public opinions, China is facing a battle of winning approval from around the world.
Well, not necessarily, because China is not the only country that have made such a declaration. Actually, there are 32 countries, including all permanent members of the UN Security Council except the United States, because the United States has not ratified UNCLOS. So this kind of declarations are permitted by international law. It's not only about China, and China has made it a long time ago, regardless of any possible claims from anybody. So China has full rights to do that.
So you have to explain to us that why not accepting this process is actually submitting to the international law rather than rejecting international.
Because we believe essentially this is about sovereignty, because it is about sovereignty in that it covers some maritime features in the South China Sea. UNCLOS, the Bible in maritime domain, is actually not about sovereignty, because it's very much made clear, even in its preamble, that with due regard to the sovereignty of all states. So it's not about sovereignty at all. And this issue actually for us is, at least for China, is an issue of sovereignty. So that's why we do not accept it.
Another concern from the U.S. is freedom of navigation, because they are not sure about the claims by China in the South China Sea. They say some features, some islands, and the surrounding waters, but the 9-dash line is not clearly defined. So they have to travel, and they have to sail, to fly in this part of the world innocently, whenever they choose. Do you think they have grounds to make that claim?
I want to point out in the very beginning that both China and the United States agree to the concept of freedom of navigation. But we do
different.
Yeah, but we have different interpretations for what it actually implies, because for the United States, it actually would include military ships or aircraft activities in the exclusive economic zone of other countries. But China disagreed. And China is not standing alone. Actually, there are about 27 countries in the world who actually hold similar ideas to China. For example, in this region, I can at least identify Malaysia, Vietnam, and India as similar countries who hold similar views. In fact, about 3 weeks ago, there is a military exercise on the ADM+ framework. Malaysia simply withdraws because Malaysia believes it is in the exclusive economic zone. According to Malaysian law, all other countries' military activities in the exclusive economic zone have to have prior notice from the Malaysian government. So we have a disagreement. The point is, why would the US, as a country who has not ratified UNCLOS, talk so much about freedom of navigation? And why would you just sail so close near China's islands and reefs? They are not commonly recognized international sea lanes.
So they regard this as a freedom of navigation thing. They will allow their commercial and military vessels to pass through this water whenever they want. And China considers it an infringement on its sovereignty.
Yes, because according to UNCLOS, in Article 58, is also clearly stipulated when countries exercise such rights, they must have due regards for the interest of the littoral states. So to what extent is due regard due? There are a lot of interpretations. But
as a result of this kind of disagreement, already we have seen face-off between two militaries. when the U.S. reconnaissance plane fly over those islands, Chinese fighter jets took off and, should I say, accompanied their operation and have observed what they've been doing. Will this kind of face-off lead to any kind of a miscalculation, misjudgment, and mismaneuvers?
There is such a danger, but I hope not, because what can be taken for such help, actually there are three different things. The first is CUES, Code of Conduct for Unplanned Encounters, which is agreed among more than 20 navies in Qingdao in 2014. Both China and the United States are part of it. And in 2014, China and the United States have also signed the two most important memorandum. One is on notification of major military activities. The other is for the security, for the safety of maritime and air encounters. So that means both sides know clearly how to interact when the ships or aircraft are at a close proximity. So they should observe good airmanship and seamanship to avoid miscalculation.
Another thing, the Shangri-La dialogue, I think it is aimed at resolving is to have an Asian version of security infrastructure, something maybe like NATO or maybe like Warsaw Pact, something that Asians can come up with to deal with Asian security challenges. Why there isn't such a mechanism yet?
Because in the Asia Pacific is so diversified, we have so many different things. For example, first of all, there is alliance of the United States with some of its allies. Secondly, ASEAN is thriving. It is recognized as a centrality of the Asia Pacific security architecture. And China and other countries have, of course, different but positive reviews regarding how we could possibly cooperate in regional security. So, in one word, there is no commonly recognized security architecture in this region. But the fact there are so many forums and there are so many institutionalized mechanisms that are mushrooming up demonstrate the fact that people want peace rather than war.
If we say there isn't a mechanism, maybe it is not so true, because there is a system that is working, that is the U.S. alliance system. U.S. has is alliance in many Asian countries, allies in Japan and South Korea, in the Philippines and Australia. Do you think it will probably divide into two camps, those who are U.S. allies and those who are not?
No, I don't think so. As I mentioned before, there is no commonly recognized security architecture in this region. But I don't believe countries will be divided into two camps with China on one side and the United States on the other side. Because even, let's come to talk about this relationship between China and the US. Is it such a relationship between foes or what it is? At best, at worst, people describe it as a relationship of frenemy, that is, friends and enemy together. So it's not a black and white
picture.
So
it would never be like
no.
U.S. and former Soviet Union, two military camps.
Nobody argues like that. And no country in this region want to make such a hard choice.
How would you define the security challenges, the security interests, conflicts and confrontations in the future?
Well, in this region, we, of course, have two types of security concern. One is associated with sovereignty. Like the islands, the rocks, all those things are related. The other thing is non-traditional areas. When we talk about non-traditional threats, we talk about the fact that in the Asia Pacific, we have probably 80% of natural disasters around the world. And we also have other issues like tsunami, earthquake, like salvage, piracy. All these issues are now becoming more and more discussed in the region. That is why we have ASEAN Regional Forum, now we have ADM+. All these kind of forums are trying to make the efforts to address all these issues.
In the beginning of the talk, you assessed the security situation in Asia Pacific. Let me give you one figure. According to International Security Institute, last year, Asia overtook Europe in terms of defense spending, with the total reaching $340 billion. So a lot of Asian countries are buying weapons, submarines, next generation fighter jets, you name it. Is this kind of arms race in Asia?
I don't think it's arms race. That would be a bit exaggerating, because first of all countries have the rights, to spend their own money on something that they believe that are worthwhile. And a lot of the countries in this region are poor countries, and in terms of militaries they're even poor. And China have some military defense industrial cooperation with some of these countries, for example, Malaysia, Indonesia, Cambodia, Laos. So really an arms race. So these kind of things are justifiable. But at the same time, we do not consider this is a healthy trend. For example, China's defense budget increase this year is the lowest since 1990. What does that imply? It implies, first of all, the Chinese government or the Chinese military is happy with the development of Chinese military, as it was showcased during the parade, the Tiananmen Parade in 2009 and last year. The more important thing is defense budget is always the best indicator of how a country look at the regional situation. Having the lowest increase in defense budget, it shows China has no intention to confront any other country in the region militarily. And it even shows confidence about China's confidence towards its healthy and sustainable relationship with the United States. Even with all this increased military presence of the United States in South China Sea, China actually is rolling back.
What about other countries?
Budget.
Australia, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia is all being stepping up their military power. Don't you think it is because of their reading of increasing security threats?
I think that has something to do with it. We must justify their own sense about the security. If people have a feeling of insecurity, they're going to do something. As I said before, China is not taking this position. And China do not consider the Asia-Pacific region is becoming more dangerous. But it's their job to consider what is best for their own national security.
All right. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on security in Asia. And thanks for watching Dialogue. I'm Zhu in Beijing. Goodbye.